After the hands have been fused, you need to decide on your quilting design before layering the quilt sandwich.
In this video, I'll talk about some of the options: free motion quilting, tying the quilt, and straight line quilting. You will need to decide on a method before going any further, as any markings on the top must be added before pin basting. Quilting is decorative as well as utilitarian, especially on this wall hanging. If you don't quilt the top, it will sag from the added weight in the pockets. When I machine quilt, I like to use a playful meandering stitch.
Let me give you a close-up of these two quilts so you can see what I'm talking about. I've stitched around the hands, and then I just meandered or doodled around the background. To do this stitch, you need to use your darning foot on your sewing machine. This is what my darning foot looks like, and when I'm ready to use it, I need to drop these feed dogs like this. As you can see, there's nothing here to pull the fabric back, and so you regulate your own stitch lengths by using your hands to pull that fabric through. And since you don't have to go in this direction, you can move your fabric any which way. If you're used to using your darning foot and working with your feed dogs down, then I would recommend using meandering for the background of your quilt. If not, there are other methods of quilting that you can try. I'll demo free motion quilting on a practice piece using a contrasting thread so you can see better. I have my darning foot attached and I've dropped my feed dogs. I lower my pressure foot and then I pull up the bobbin thread like this. I want to make sure that I hold both of these threads when I start. So when I start, I put down my pressure foot and I like to stitch in place 1 or 2 times, and now I'm ready to go. The safety pin might get in the way, so I'm going to take that out and begin. Now, when I begin to stitch, my hands are moving the fabric, and the speed that I'm stitching and how fast my hands are moving, that determines my stitch length. The more you practice this, the better you get. Usually I like to practice on a little piece before I go to my quilt, just to get the hang and see where I'm at on my stitch length and so forth. So let's keep doing that. So I come to a new safety pin. I want to take that out, and notice that my hands are acting as an embroidery hoop. I'm making the fabric taut so it won't bunch up. When I get to the hands, I want to outline or edge the fabric. Over time, this fusible may start to break down and the hands may lift up. If you sew around the hand, you won't have to worry about this. So let me go over to the hand. Oops. Yeah. So I'm just edging right around that hand. Just enough to catch it. Of course, if you want to put a decorative stitch on the hand, you can certainly zigzag around it or do some other stitch. But when the fabric matches the thread, you don't notice you're stitching so much. So let me just go around this finger. And I'm going to come back in here and I'll show you how to end this. I'm going to come around, going to stitch 2 or 3 times in one spot, lift this up, and then clip the threads. Usually when I start, I clip these threads after I've gone like maybe this far. I like to clip those threads so they don't get in the middle of everything that I'm doing. So this is free motion quilting, and before you use this, I would definitely practice it. A simpler method is to tie the quilt every 3 to 4 inches. I prepared a small sample so you can see what this looks like. I'm using brown pearlized cotton thread, but normally I would match the background or possibly use white to make it look like snow falling. So I take my needle, I'm going to go through all layers and take a little bite. And it could be smaller than this, but this will do. So I pull my thread, and I'm not going to pull it all the way through. This is going to be the little piece left over to make the tie. If you want, it could be longer to make it easier to tie, but if you don't want to waste thread, you can make it a little bit shorter. Now, I like to take 2 stitches here just to make sure that it's secure, but 1 will do on this quilt. So there's my second stitch. And I'm going to clip this off. And you just take these 2 ends of thread and tie once, and then tie a second time. And there you have your tied quilt. These edges can be snipped. Make it shorter, you can make them longer, whatever you decide. On this quilt, I decided to go with straight line quilting in a crosshatch design. I wasn't sure how it would look, so I first drew it on tissue paper. I started in the center using my 45-degree line on my ruler. I made these diagonal lines about every 3 inches. I decided on 3 inches because that's the width of the ruler, and it just made it much easier to measure. I also wanted to get an idea of what 1.5 inch lines would look if I were to decide to go with the smaller crosshatch design. So I marked some of these on my tissue paper. To mark the lines on my quilt top, I'm using this erasable fabric marking pencil. I almost use this new marking pen, but it comes off when hit with an iron. Since I need to press this before basting, I would lose all my lines, which is not good. I've finished marking the top, and I'm ready to put the quilt sandwich together. I've decided on my final dimensions, and I've trimmed any excess fabric off the sides. I'll take this top and my backing fabric to the ironing board for one final pressing.